Hello and welcome to the Breakthrough and Thrive Summit. I am your host, Jamie Lynn, and this is where you have the opportunity to ignite your power, take charge of your healing, and create your happiness after experiencing sexual abuse and trauma. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Fred. So his mission, his passion is to transform the conversation that we have as a global conversation of mental illness. Thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really great to be here. Thank you, Jamie Lynn. Really appreciate it.
So do you want to elaborate a little bit more about what you're doing and what you're up to?
Yes, it'd be my pleasure. So I'm a psychiatrist by trade. And what that means is that I went to medical school and, from 1984 to 1988. And even before that, I was in the mental health field. And I was in the mental health field as a child care worker starting in 1980, actually January of 1980. So this January, it'll mark 40 years in the mental health field. And I have, really been working almost double time for most of those 40 years. So you could almost say that I've been in the field for 80 years. And one of the things that's really always been a passion of mine is really getting how communication, being connected to another person, the healing value of being connected to another person has always been my greatest passion. And that's really why I think I found myself in the field in after I graduated undergraduate school, or even before I graduated, I was already doing childcare work. So, I always knew that people seem to magnetize to me and want to tell me their issues and their problems and their successes and their hurdles and obstacles and those kinds of things. And I really saw that being with another person provided a whole new way of them seeing themselves, me seeing myself, and new pathways that could be created just by getting in contact and being connected to another person. And that's what I was hoping to get when I pursued my psychiatric aspirations. So having been a childcare worker, I saw how psychiatry was doing their work there. And I really thought that I could do that work and maybe even do it exemplary. So I then got out of childcare work and went to medical school in Chicago at Northwestern and got a fairly conventional, it's a beautiful school in a beautiful city. And I got a fairly conventional training in psychiatry. And I've been a psychiatrist. I've been a doctor since 1988 and a psychiatrist officially since, I suppose, like 1991. In all of that time over the last, we're almost looking at, 30 or so years, psychiatry has gone through a mammoth amount of their own level of transformation. While I was going to medical school, a drug you may have heard of called Prozac was introduced. And Prozac became a medication that was the number one medication prescribed in the world, all specialties included, for 12 years. And it was like, really, there was a push, for instance, to have Prozac put into the water supply of Los Angeles, California. There were people who really thought that it was the miracle drug and that it was putting away anything called depression, or something called maybe an affliction with this thing called biological depression. And that's when this whole notion of having a clinical disease came to bear. So people started talking about clinical depression, clinical anxiety, clinical symptomology, clinical diagnoses. Now, that isn't why I went into field, but that is what happened while I was going through my studentship. So then I had to learn how to become an expert in diagnosing and then in treating. And as you and I had a discussion before this meeting, part of what separates a psychiatrist from the other mental health professionals is that psychiatrists are burdened with, or it may be given the opportunity to medicate people, and no one else in the field actually has that. So I became generally an expert in medicating people, and certainly an expert in diagnosing people. There was, that was my job, and it was never satisfying. And as my typecast sort of expanded over the next few decades, it became less and less important to even communicate with my patients.
So I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
What were a couple of, if you could list some downfalls or some struggles with the diagnosing process?
Yeah.
What would happen?
Well, let me start from now, and then I'll tell you exactly what happened. What's happened now is I now call myself a non-diagnosing psychiatrist. I don't diagnose anybody anymore with anything. I don't have it that anybody has any psychiatric conditions or that it's helpful in any way to tell anybody or to agree with somebody that they have a psychiatric condition. And that's really where I'm starting from now at this point in my career. And I am finding that that's providing the substrate for massive successes in giving people back their lives after trauma, after being diagnosed for years, after having just atrocities occur in their lifetime, in their circumstances. So I want to start from there. Now, let me back up and say what happened is I started getting that the power that existed when I told someone they had a condition was extraordinary. Like I would tell someone they had something and then they would have it for the rest of their lives just because I said so. So they didn't have it when they came into the office. Go ahead.
I just want to share something with you.
Yeah.
When I was going through all of the court things, one of the mandates was that I go see a psychiatrist for 3 months. And so I was given, she's like, well, I have to diagnose you something.
Exactly.
For the court records, it has to show something. And she's like, you're a typical teenage girl. Like there's really, all the woes you have, other than the obvious, every teenage girl goes through. So she, like I don't know, you could probably fill in the blank.
309.28, adjustment disorder.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know.
And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. She's like, you don't need to. And
exactly.
I was like, okay, well then I'm not diagnosed with anything if I don't need to know. So I was free in not being attached to whatever came out of her mouth because she told me not to worry about it.
It's interesting, whether or not she tells you not to worry about it, the 309.28 and the psychiatric diagnosis now is attached to you, whether or not you agree to it.
It's in my file.
It's absolutely in your files. Right. And if she didn't use 309.28, let's say she used dysthymia, 300.4. If she did that, thinking that that was a soft condition, then that's what's attached to you. If she used generalized anxiety disorder, 300.00, that would be the same thing. You're like, oh yeah, don't worry, that's not a major diagnosis. Well, as it turns out, it's at least a diagnosis.
Right.
And at the very end,
anyway.
Right, exactly.
I was like, don't label me. I'm not even going to accept that.
What's unfortunate is if you look at it, you're still stuck with it by bringing it into this discussion. Yeah. Even though because I'm not labeled is only the flip side of I'm labeled.
Yeah.
It's only a not of something that's already there. And so this is exactly what I'm talking about. As I started looking at how can I really affect people? How can I get people the empowerment that they had lost? What I got was that when I diagnose people, I forever steal their empowerment. As soon as I give them any diagnosis, whether it's a large one, a small one, a medium one, a French one, it doesn't matter. As soon as I give them a diagnosis, I create a power gradient. I create an idea that I know what you have and that you are less than average.
Yep.
I make that distinction, and it's interesting, it doesn't become a distinction until you agree. And you naturally agree because I am the doctor. So because the doctor said, I have X. And since now you say, okay, well, doctor said I have dysthymia, so that's what I have. Or doctor said I have bipolar, that's what I have. And then all the meanings and everything that comes with that diagnosis, including not being that diagnosis, are something that that person is then living with and living into for the rest of their lives. Literally for the rest of their lives. Now, what that normally includes from a psychiatric standpoint is that the treatment, when people make a referral to psychiatry over the last 20 years, what they've determined, these are usually other ancillary disciplines in the mental health field, they have determined that whatever techniques they were using did not work, and therefore they throw up their hands and say, well, You actually have an organic condition whose only help might be that you need medication. And since you need medication and no other field provides it, upward you go, referral to psychiatry, they'll tell you what you have and they'll give you the proper organic, toxic medication to sort of alter what you think might be a chemical imbalance. Yeah. Now, again, stepping back from this, especially the last few years, as I began to see that what I was doing wasn't naturally helping people, and that sort of started officially in about 2006 where I began to see that, I began to see that it's not even the medications alone that are causing the problem at all. Many times, medications, in fact, perpetuate the symptoms they're marketed to treat. And many times, medications actually cause the symptoms they're marketed to treat. And when you see that, as you get shocked about that, what I'm going to posit is that you already know that. And that in fact, all I did was open the lid on a can that's already there for you. Yep. It's like, oh my goodness, that makes too much sense.
It's like, I knew it. Exactly. My whole life, I knew it.
Exactly. Yep. Thank you. Mm-hmm. What's really interesting about that is that everyone knows it. And it's not being talked about. And here's the story. The story is that there's some value, some very real value to being given a condition. And it's not like you're bad or wrong to accept it. But once I know that I have a condition, then every time I act in ways I wish I wouldn't, I can always say that that wasn't me.
Yes.
That was the condition that I'm afflicted with.
Yep. That's the, I don't need to be responsible for who I am, what I'm doing, or what's going on in my life. It's
exactly
me. It's happening at me. I have no control.
Exactly. And in some avenues that I traffic in, and probably you do as well, it's called like a persistent complaint. A persistent complaint, and combined with a fixed way of being, actually. A persistent complaint combined with a fixed way of being, meaning this thing continues to be problematic and one is pretty sure that it can't change because you're affected by it. Now, there's some real value in carrying that around because it does offer an alternative to taking responsibility for the things you do that you're not proud of, or things that you do that you wish you wouldn't, or you're ashamed of. Rather than getting that shame and guilt and not being proud of things you do is an inherent part of actual humanity.
So I've got something.
Sure.
I had 2 other diagnoses that I was given, and I was very young when I was given them: dyslexia and ADD.
Right.
And so now when I get tired and I see the words like that, the end of the word first, that's how my brain, I guess. So I go into that, and it's like it's hard for me to stop myself from explaining I'm dyslexic. So it's like, every corner. I couldn't read and comprehend until 3 years ago because of my dyslexia. I can't spell properly because of my dyslexia. The reasons just keep going. And it's so natural because I was told this is dyslexia, and it was pointed out multiple times throughout my life. This is dyslexia. That's why you are the way you are.
Exactly. And I really appreciate that. And I even appreciate that once you accept that you've been afflicted with a disorder, you really have.
Yeah.
It's as real could be.
Yeah. And it's really hard to get my mind to stop thinking that way. And I don't, is it possible to stop?
Yes, it is. You see, that's the thing. It's really great. Really, really a great question. And I think we can address it succinctly and really get what might be possible here. Yeah. On the one hand, you let's say you come into a doctor. I'm going to make an outrageous analogy, and then we'll come back to, is it possible to lose your diagnosis? You come into a doctor, you got some concerns, you've seen some people, and you're big and you're clumsy, and you drink too much water and you're not like anybody else. And you come to a doctor and try to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor looks at you and says, oh, I know what it is. You're an elephant. And you go, oh. I'm like, yeah, I'm an elephant expert and I know elephants and you're an elephant. You're like, it just explains everything, doctor.
Yeah.
I'm thirsty all the time. I actually have a great memory. I'm clumsy inside of a china shop or whatever. And it makes sense. I'm not like anyone. Big ears. I got the whole thing going on. Thank you.
Yeah.
At that moment, you really are an elephant. But another thing you really are one, by the way. And the next thing that happens is that when you tell another person that you're an elephant, that person gets that you're an elephant. And this diagnosis or this thing called elephant will never leave you again, ever. Never, ever. No matter what. Even if someone else says to you, you're not an elephant, what you're going to think inside is, you're wrong. My doctor told me, and my sister also agrees. And my sister even has traits of elephant.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that you think I'm not an elephant, but that's because you don't know me. I know me. And off you go, learning about elephants and getting to be a lot like elephants. Because after all, it's what you really are. All right. So if we use that as a backdrop, you start asking what happens? How can I lose my diagnosis of elephant or of dyslexia or of ADD or of anything? And I'm going to say this. This is where transforming the conversation of mental illness as a functional entity is what I'm talking about. The first thing to get is that you don't have dyslexia. For instance, you're like, no, I do. No, well, no, you don't.
Okay.
What you have is a conversation that's supported by you and the prevailing conversation in the community that says that you have a condition, a known condition after all, of this thing called dyslexia, which has you turning words around or something, and therefore different than average. And that's what you have. Now, nothing wrong with that. Totally get it. The way to start not having that condition is to state out loud that I don't have dyslexia. I have Jamie Lynn Warber. That's what I have.
Yeah.
I am this. I am not afflicted by an outside condition. Now, that's not enough. That sounds like, smoke and mirrors.
It's a start.
Yeah. Right. What I'm suggesting is that when you start living into all of life has you being a spectacular, maybe most people have this thing that they flip around words or do that. And that we, those of us who aren't yet diagnosed with dyslexia, think that we read proper. Who knows what's really going on? We don't know this flippage. You don't know how different you are or how same you are or even how gifted you might be if you consider yourself with an affliction. Mm-hmm. So what's possible is you can start getting that every single experience, and I mean every experience, is a critical, magnificent part of you being a human. Then your diagnoses fade away. And upon fading away, you start getting something, again, that I think you already play with. This idea that you are inherently whole, complete, and perfect. Inherently. Yep. Everything going on is whole, complete, and perfect. Now, if we start talking about the trauma aspect of this, no. Maybe you're whole, complete, and perfect, but I went through some serious trauma. X number of years ago, and I'm broken.
Yep, that's so common.
It's really common, right? There is an opportunity to alter that too. And it's a sensitive opportunity. There's an opportunity to get that broken is not what you are. That the memories or the concerns or the pain, the shame, the guilt, the blame are things that are lingering long past the traumatic event. And with proper care, concern, and transformation of the conversation, don't have to translate to a self-inflicted concern of being broken. They really don't. They really don't. Now, that doesn't say anything about the trauma being less traumatic than it was. Under no conditions is it decreasing the extent of the pain or the atrocity or the intolerability of the trauma. But what it does say is that now isn't then, and what's available is a transformation in the conversation that supports a present diagnosis, that in fact, in that transformation, creates a new way of looking at things that no longer translates into being afflicted, diagnosed, less than defective, broken.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
That is so powerful. And like, how to get there? How to, like, for me, I'm really working on subconscious, like planting the seeds, repeating myself over and over until the belief sets in that I'm simply Jamie Lynn, which is a very powerful way to live, is to be who you are.
You are, exactly.
100% of who you are.
Yeah, 100%, including the part that doesn't know you're Jamie Lynn.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of being Jamie Lynn too.
Yeah.
Like, do you get that even as hard as you try, or pounding in your head, or meditating, or, writing and reading, all of those things, and not knowing, somehow forgetting this most obvious concept that all you are is Jamie Lynn, is part of being Jamie Lynn.
Yeah.
That part of being human is being fairly certain that you're different than other humans. And every human has it, that who they are is different than every other human. Therefore, every human is like every human, because every human has it, that periodically we are quite certain that we are different than every other human. And that's a human trait. I hope you were able to follow that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for some of us, we'll have to slow it down and watch that a couple of times to get it, but it makes a lot of sense when you just soak it all in. And here's another question for you.
Sure.
What is the future of psychology going to be then?
Psychiatry and psychology have a future.
Again.
Yeah, it's really okay that you do that. And I think, look, psychiatrists get they can get like defensive about that. And the only reason it's not about defensive, for me, it's about being accurate. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not better or worse than a psychologist. I'm just not a psychologist.
Yeah.
So the future of psychiatry, psychiatry is built on this notion that there's afflictions and that there's biological treatments associated with it. Now, there's some psychiatry that isn't related to that. And there's some degree of mental illness that doesn't go after this as if it's a biological chemical imbalance. In my world, it's not so much that I'm looking for what the future of psychiatry as a field is. What I am looking for is, I call myself a non-diagnosing psychiatrist, and my intention is to really re-inject or continue to inject the notion that communication, connection, creativity, and detoxification are really the ways of managing any type of psychological or mental concerns that one might have. That might come through different forms of self-expression. For instance, what I call the creative 8, which is singing, dancing, arts, music, drama, cooking, writing, gardening. Those are the creative 8. Those are things for which we actually create into the world and are forms of self-expression. Then there's also photography, and even cleaning, cleaning your room or your home is a form of expression. And ultimately, really, one of the ways to get rid of, or at least alleviate any primary discomfort or disempowerment that one might have, is to help anybody do anything right now. Like, just get up and help anybody do anything. You don't have to help the old lady across the street. You don't have to volunteer in a nursing home. You can help anyone do anything. And at that time, you'll notice that any kind of concerns about your symptomology or your condition or your pathology or your diagnosis absolutely disappears in those moments. And it's moment by moment, this stuff. And when you reacquire your diagnosis, it's worth asking yourself, what's in it to know yourself as broken, defective, afflicted? Not that there's something wrong with it, but what's happening that has one get that they are being affected negatively by previous conditions?
So, okay, so it's like asking the question, what do I get from this? What do I like? I know this is not the best word, but what do I like about this?
Almost, almost. And again, for those people who are really turned off by us going here, this isn't about manipulating. This isn't about, what's in it for me necessarily. But why does it work for one to argue back? When someone says you're okay and you say, no, I'm not, what is that?
Yeah.
What is the argument about no, I'm not? What space does that provide you to dig heels in and say, I am less than? Not being okay is one thing, right? Like something terrible happens and you're crying and or you're in a lot of pain, or you're scared, or you're depressed about the past. And not feeling good is part of being human. Like that's not okay. But not being okay as a human, that's when I start really asking, what's in it for you to stick the stake in the ground and make sure we know that you're not okay? And what I'm suggesting is, even when I offer people empowerment, sometimes they turn it down. They don't really want to learn that they're not their diagnosis. They're like, no, thank you, doc. I got a diagnosis and I'm keeping it.
Yep. It's mine. I got to hold on to that.
Yep.
And it becomes so ingrained and so, like I was describing earlier, like natural to say, I'm dyslexic. That's why that happens. It's like,
Exactly.
I don't have to explain why I think this way.
Exactly.
I just think this way.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
But I put it in before the question's even there.
Exactly. So you walk around with that being, an inherent part of who you are, and has you be at the effect of that. And that what I'm suggesting is that you don't have to be that way.
Right. Or like I keep going off track, but to bring it back to sexual abuse, I'm a legal victim. If you look at, I am you can't look at victim records, but if you had the right fingers, you could. I am legally a victim in the eyes of the court.
Yes.
So if any other crime were to happen with me being involved with it, whether I do it or whether I don't, it is on record that I am already a victim.
Right.
And that I'm diagnosed with whatever those numbers were earlier.
Right. No, right. I am a victim creates a certain really extensive set of conditions of how one then walks through the world and sees the world that actually perpetuates the notion that I am a victim.
Yes, and we're going to go for a couple of minutes here because this is very exciting and I'm very passionate about it. The second I was told I was a victim, the second I felt powerful. I walked out of my counselor's office going, I got my life back. It's mine. And then I turned around and had to write the statement and had to be interviewed, and I had to talk to the DA, and I had to go to court, and I had to then turn around and be the offender. I was actually charged. And then I was now recovering from this. And then there was so much of the world's view dropped on a 15-year-old who's trying to live her life and find a good boyfriend and go to college. That's all I wanted.
Yeah.
But I lived into, and then I had a child and lived into it again. And then I had another change and lived into it again. And so every time I had an excuse to be angry, I had an excuse to be fucked in the head, I had an excuse to cry, I had an excuse over and over and over instead of stopping. And this isn't the easiest thing in the world, I get it, but to stop and ask why. Why can't I stop yelling? Why can't I stop screaming? Why am I always angry? And I'd ask that a lot. And I was starting to find the answer was not in the why, but what I was saying to myself.
Exactly. Yeah. How you see yourself, when one is constricted or restricted by self promoted restraints, then one feels like they're in prison, and then they don't even realize that the warden is them.
Yeah.
And
And
and you're fighting a battle you're fighting against really the author of the battle, the choreographer of the battle, the producer, the executioner. The whole thing is you.
yeah. And to get out of it, like you don't want to make yourself suffer. You don't want to make yourself angry, but you, in that moment, unless an outside source can guide you, you don't know that you're doing this.
Exactly. So that's where we get to this notion of a conversation. Left inside of yourself, nothing new can be learned.
Yes.
So it does require a conversation, and it requires a conversation not like I have something to give you. I just have a space to have a conversation that alters the paradigm of how one is looking their life. And
Mhm.
because I can do that, and frankly, any human has all that capacity to do that,
You're just
then what's
licensed. You got the license.
yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, I got the license. And we can really get that, oh wow, Dr. Fred says this, and therefore maybe there's that. Like I am using the the illusion of me being a specialist human to be able to see that connection, like to own back again what I already knew before I went into medical school, back in high school and even younger, that connecting with another person is what creates new avenues of ways of being.
Yeah. Look at a 2-year-old. I've got 2 toddlers, my own and a friend of mine. And they're happiest when they can communicate together in a way that works for both of them.
Yeah, for sure.
They can't talk very well.
No, it doesn't even require words. It just requires being with another. It really
Yeah.
does.
And they
Super.
love it, and they miss each other, and they ask for each other all the time. It's great. And that is the basis of human nature. So
Exactly.
and I've done this myself, when you trap yourself in your house, meaning like I can't go anywhere because I don't have any money, I have a kid, I can't go anywhere, and you make all these excuses of I only go to work and home.
Yeah,
Okay, you're that's a prison,
it
and
is.
and you created it.
Right. There's a real opportunity to tell, again, it's not a one and done thing. It's not a one conversation and done. But one thing it isn't, Jamie Lynn, is it's not an extensive several year operation either. In about 2 or 3 months, sometimes in 1 or 2 months, sometimes in 2 or 4 conversations, we can really alter the way that someone sees the world and then actually have it that their diagnosis truly doesn't just get better, doesn't cure, it actually, no kidding, absolutely disappears. And that's what I do for a living.
Ah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited. You have no idea. I am Thank you, Dr. Fred. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the reality that you're bringing us.
Thank you.
I
Yeah.
like this reality
And
a
yeah,
lot.
right. This is something, right. Exactly. Like, oh yeah, back to life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, you know when it fits you when you're this lit up. You
Yes.
know?
Thank you. It's really great to see you that way. Awesome.
Ah, it's so exciting. And to the audience, we're going to wrap it up now. Just thank you for your commitment. I get that this conversation, it's not easy because it's not what we've grown up with, right? It's different. But
Yeah.
watch this one more time. See what it is. Just try it on and see what this is about. And then follow Dr. Fred.
Yeah, that'd be great. Follow me. I can be found on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel that's growing as well. I'm Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net. I have a webpage that's pretty good and it at least gives you a little bit more information of who I am. But if you really want to find me, finding me on Facebook or finding me in my group, Welcome to Humanity on Facebook or in Global Madness, I have a couple very exciting projects that I'm up to. That'd be one way. If you're interested in what I'm up to and feel like you want to contribute, we have a ever-growing list of people we call the conversation creators in action. So people who are working with me to actually get the word out that maybe diagnoses are just a conversation that are subject to transformation. And we'd love to talk to you more about that. Or if you want to do any kind of work with me or know someone who might want to do work with me, then the way to find me is at Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net. That's the easiest way. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fred. It was a
My
pleasure
pleasure.
and an honor to have
Thanks,
you.
man. It's really great to catch up with you. It's really beautiful to see you so lit up. And I say that same for anyone out there who's positively or even negatively, I don't know how it would be negative, but affected by what we're doing here. it's really great to have touched your heart as well. So thank you, Jamie Lynn. Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, my pleasure. This was just absolutely amazing. All right, audience, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.